things than that.
What's going on, guys? We are here with Eric Helms at the Ultimate Evidence-Based Conference, and Eric just gave a presentation on autoregulation. So, nuts and bolts of your presentation, Eric, were that autoregulation is a little more than just the RPE scale.
Right.
So, do you want to talk about some of the other concepts related to autoregulation that you discussed?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think autoregulation in the form we typically know it does come from Mike Toucher. It's RPE-based. Team RTS for the shout-out. Yeah. So it's always had this kind of powerlifting bias, if you will. Where people think it can only be used for powerlifting type training or strength training. But in reality, autoregulation is basically any process by which you're matching the readiness or the recovery level of the athlete with modifications to the already existing training plan. And basically in the research, we have about 5 different methods of autoregulating training right now, and there's really no limit to how many there could be. RPE can be used in a number of ways, but at its basic core, it's simply a way to match up the intended load with what the person's actually capable of. As a basic example, we did a study with Dr. Zerdos where we took the 1 RM of trained individuals, males, with at least 1.5 times body weight squat, and then we put 70% on the bar, and they did as many repetitions as they could to failure. And there was a range of 9 to 26. So that means when you prescribe a 3x8 at 70%, you might be giving one person an absolutely crushing, potentially impossible workout for that third set. And another person, it might literally feel like they did 3 warm-ups and left. So RPE is a potential solution to that, where you can get someone much tighter in that range. So you could give someone, say, for example, 3x8 at 70%, and by the way, the RPE range should be between 6 to 8. So that if they hit that 9 RPE on that first set, they can drop the load 2 to 4%. And if they hit that 3 RPE on the first set, they can kick it up a much larger percentage.
Awesome. And some of the research that you discussed was obviously yours and Zerdos' research on load selection.
Sure.
But there was also Mann and others in 2010 on load progression, autoregulating load progression, and McNamara in terms of flexibility in
training schedule.
Schedule creation and daily undulating periodization. That's right.
Yeah, it was basically having, so there's a ton of ways you can auto-regulate things, and it all just comes down to ways to give the athlete flexibility in such a way that they can perform better. So I think the first time we really saw auto-regulation appear in the peer-reviewed literature was 2010 by Mann, the legend in the field, and he's the man. Mann is the man. And he took something from actually the book by Mel Siff, Super Training, which was EPRE, Autoregulatory Progressive Resistance Exercise. And it's simply doing an AMRAP set and then basing how many reps you get on that AMRAP as a way of guiding the load progression over time. So instead of having like a fixed progression where you go 70, 72.5, 75, 77%, where you might be gaining strength much faster than that intended load progression, or slower, you're matching up your actual performance after a mesocycle or a microcycle and saying, we should modulate how quickly we're trying to progress or not. And like you said, McNamara and Stern, 2010, same year, they basically looked at a college weight training class. They could choose each day when they went in if they wanted to do like a 10, 15, or 20 RM workout based on how ready they felt. Typically, when they felt the most ready, they would go the heaviest, so a 10 RM workout. And that group that got that selection gained more strength in the leg press than the other group. So I think Dr. Zerdos says this best. You always want to think about research conceptually. You're not trying to take the exact protocol. But what we essentially know there is that an athlete's perception of readiness may give an indication to when they're best ready to perform. So you could have a hard, medium, and easy workout, or a number of those per week, and give more or less of a floating schedule with some type of tools so the athlete is good at gauging readiness. You wouldn't just give it to them fresh to a beginner.
And that was something you spoke about, and the concept of anchoring.
Yes.
So learning how to use these tools and specifically how to modulate what the intensity actually feels like. You want to talk about what anchoring is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why the RPE scale that Mike T came up with, it's based on repetitions in reserve, has gained popularity in lifting is because the original RPE scale that Borg developed, I'm pronouncing it like an American, is actually
Berger.
Is that it was based on cardiovascular training research. So the original scale was 6 to 20, roughly correlating with the 60 resting heart rate and a 200 max heart rate on average. And it was used in cardiovascular training research, and that was kind of the anchor. Like, we know this is roughly related to heart rate. it doesn't quite apply to resistance training. And when they started using the Borg RPE scale for resistance training, they'd find that people would go to failure and go, yep, that was a 7 RPE. And it's like, what? Yeah. So until you actually tell someone that, hey, a 10 is defined as going to failure, 0 repetitions in reserve, they're going to compare that to whatever other subjective exercise experiences they have. So if you bring a triathlete in and do a 3 RM, it's like, yeah, that was a hard thing, but it,
I could have done 30 more.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. Like I could have, it's definitely not as hard as the hardest thing I've experienced. So the built-in anchoring that is in the repetitions and reserve-based RPE scale makes it a lot more accurate. You can start using it right out of the get-go once you familiarize someone. And because there's an objective definition for it. It's gauged subjectively, but the scale itself is objective. It's how many more reps could you have done?
Yeah, awesome. And something I really liked at the end of your presentation, which I really hope a lot of the attendees took away, was that the concepts that you're talking about are all applications of the principles of resistance training, and they're not fixed methods that you just apply blanketly, like you alluded to earlier with taking the research into somebody's practice. So why is the principles of autoregulation so important to understand, and what are the ways that people can, I guess, think about them to create more flexibility for their clients and be as creative as possible?
Absolutely. So the one really interesting outcome that we've seen in research is that when you stop looking at averages and you look at individual results, you'll see some people are quote-unquote non-responders to weight training. Now, I don't actually think they're true non-responders to weight training. I think they're non-responders for that 8 to 12 week program that they tested. So that tells us just how important individualization is. And autoregulatory approaches are essentially the answer to a lack of individualization. When you're able to bring in things like RPE or APRE, flexible training schedules, volume autoregulation, using like velocity or RPE stops, all of a sudden now you can take a program you started with and modify it to better match that person's capabilities. And ideally, we start to see more of those non-responders getting some type of response. And so the big principle there is that, yeah, you start with some type of fixed program. You start with a baseline. Like if you just say, hey, how do you train? Oh, I auto-regulate. That actually means nothing. You would come in with some type of periodization model, some type of baseline volume, intensity, and focus of the training program. You might have accumulation blocks, intensity blocks. You might have a DUP setup, et cetera, et cetera. And then you use that as a template to apply auto-regulation strategies to make it better match that individual.
There's always other parameters that you're applying auto-regulation to.
Absolutely. It doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Awesome. Guys, if you do want to vacuum and clean your shit up, listen to Eric Helms. Follow the guys at 3DMJ and make sure that you check out all his work over at MASS, Monthly Applications of Strength Sports, with Greg Knuckles and Mike's Autos, because you can learn a hell of a lot there. Eric,
thanks, brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Awesome.